growth. Part 2, we're going to talk about outside investment. I am back. I'm in one of my campaign shirts. It says, I love Coeur d'Alene. Michael Lentz for mayor. You can pick one up on my website, Strong Young Mayor. You can get it without the mayor endorsement if you just love Coeur d'Alene. You can get it there. This is where the videos on growth are going to take a little bit of a turn because I'm the only candidate who's going to talk about anything from here on forward. This is a big reason why I'm running. Jim, you can look at his website. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can. And he'll basically just say that vote for Jim if you want to keep one of Idaho's fastest growing cities responsible, energetic, and vibrant, or something like that. Basically, he likes the growth. Vote for Jim because he wants to keep it going. I've talked with Joe Alfieri, who's also running, and he basically is against density and doesn't have much to say about anything else, which we just did density in the previous video. We would pretty much agree on that, but he's not going to say anything else relative to what we're talking about here. So this is where things are going to get interesting and where aspects of growth are going to happen that people don't realize unless the city government takes an active interest in not allowing them to happen. And I also want to make this disclaimer ahead of time that I obviously don't have easy access to the city attorneys. I'm obviously not an attorney. So when we talk about various things, this is all sort of under the theoretical umbrella that whatever it is good and legal and can be done. I know there are things that can be done. There are things that I speculate maybe can be done, but I don't know that exactly until I obviously would sit down with the city attorney or, obviously get the city council together with city attorneys and find out what sort of ordinances we could create, what sort of situations we could create that would be legal. So I just want to put it out there. I'm obviously not trying to do anything that's illegal, but I also am willing to experiment and I'm willing to try some new things and I'm willing to talk about things and do things that no one else is willing to talk about, obviously, because I'm the only one talking about them. So let's talk a little bit about outside investment. We all know what that means. People from outside of Coeur d'Alene, outside of Idaho, are buying houses here. They're turning them into rentals or using them as Airbnbs, or they're just taking over. Maybe they're buying them from a resident, turning it into a rental. Maybe they're acquiring various rental properties and so forth. Whether that's Airbnbs, VRBOs, or just standard rentals, outside investment has come into the area. It's made the real estate market superheated. It's made the prices go way up, which if you own a house, obviously that's good for you. But if you don't own a house, it's not good for you. And allegedly about 30%, from what I can tell, statistically speaking from census data, 30% of the population of Coeur d'Alene are renters. So for them, this is definitely not so good. This is also probably the part, if you haven't figured it out already, if you own 20 houses and you've just got your little fiefdom and you can't wait to jack up rent on your next tenant, I'm not the candidate for you. I'm not here to make people who own 20 houses more money. If you're a developer that wants to build 50-story apartment buildings, I'm not for you. So I'm not apologizing and I'm not changing my position on those things. It just is what it is. The reason I'm running is because I want to help people who are renting, help people who don't want their neighborhood, their culture, their city to be changed and overrun by growth. And that just is what it is. So outside investment, we all understand it. The shorthand term for this obviously is the Californians, but it could be people from Oregon, it can be people from Washington, it can be people with money from China, it could be oil guys from Dubai, it could be financiers from London. It doesn't really matter. It could be hedge funds. It can be various hedge funds or venture capital funds, which are now apparently getting into the rental real estate market. So outsiders is just a term for saying outside of Idaho. Because if you own a rental property here in Idaho, you own a rental property or two, I'm not trying to stop those people from making a little extra money, having an investment, that sort of thing. That's not the goal. The goal is to stop people from out of state from buying up large portions of the area and forcing locals out. So that's what happens is when the real estate market starts to go way, way up and the rental market follows, you can see what happens now. Everything's very expensive. That's the obvious thing. But the downstream effects of this are that it's going to cause renters to have to leave the area because they can't afford to rent here. And when renters start leaving the area, you're going to have businesses that don't have employees. If you drive down Appleway, drive down Sherman, 95, pretty much every retail hospitality place is hiring. Pretty much every retail hospitality place that I've seen is short-staffed. Rogers over on Government has had the dining room closed, I want to say for almost 2 months now, because they don't have the staff to staff the inside of the dining room. And I'll address this in the next video on corporations. But this is one of the downstream effects of the market getting superheated and way out of control. Now, who does this benefit? When the market goes crazy like this, who is this benefiting? Well, obviously, if you own your house here and your house price goes up, that benefits you. That's fine. But when you have a bunch of foreign investors who are, let's say from California, whatever, it doesn't matter. California is just a shorthand. But in this example, let's say you have a Californian and they buy a house here every year because they just make crazy money in California. And why not? Why wouldn't you just take an extra $300,000, $400,000, whatever, even if you just bought it with a mortgage, you put some down, you're putting 80 grand down. Why wouldn't you do that to get 30%, 40% on your investment every year? I mean, this past year, I think it's 47% right now, year over year, housing prices, and it was probably 30% the year before that and the year before that. Excuse me. So why wouldn't you do that? If you had extra money, why wouldn't you? Because then you can get rent on top of that. You can have the mortgage pay for itself and get 30% on your money. It's a no-brainer, right? So if one person does that, that's not a big deal. 10 people do it, 100 people do it, it's not so good. When you start getting 1,000 people doing that, that's not good. And the reason it's not good is for several reasons. Number one, the area is not designed, Coeur d'Alene and North Idaho specifically, is not designed for what we would think of as affordable housing. There's not government subsidized apartments. There's not big apartment buildings, lots of them that have studio apartments or cheap housing and things like that. So for the housing market to get unhinged, it means that there's a whole lower section of people. And these are people working honest jobs. I mean, working at a fast food place is an honest job. Working as a tradesman is an honest job. Just because you're only making $15 or $20 an hour, it doesn't mean that you're not doing honest work or that you're not working hard. But if you don't have available housing, then you obviously can't stay in that area. So the first thing that it does is it pushes people at the lower incomes working honest jobs out of the area, which is why you see all these places that are short-staffed now. For example, and I know the popular thing is to say, well, people don't want to work. But if you look on Craigslist, for example, I haven't looked for a few days, but a couple days ago when I most recently looked, the cheapest available apartment in Coeur d'Alene was, I believe, a 392 square foot studio that's available December 1st. So you have to make, I believe it's roughly about $18 an hour to qualify for the studio apartment that's available however many months from now, 2 months from now, 3 months from now. The next available unit was $1,150. It was some sort of duplex. You have to make $22 an hour to qualify for that. Those are the two cheapest options that I saw when I looked just the other day. Now, any of these jobs on Appleway that you go look at, they're paying $14, $15, $16 an hour. Retail, hospitality jobs. If you work in a nice restaurant, maybe you make $20 an hour. If you're in this area, I'm sure 20, 25 is probably about the tops for most restaurant jobs. In order to qualify for the cheapest apartment that's available, you'd have to make $22 an hour. So the problem with the area and the way it's designed, being single family housing, nice neighborhoods, et cetera, without the apartments, is that the area can't handle housing getting out of reach of people who work lower end, modest jobs. And so what happens is those people have to leave the area. The other thing that happens is that people also just become incentivized to leave. When I first got here, my cable guy was telling me, the guy who installed the cable was telling me that he was selling his house and moving to Missouri because it would allow him to basically like buy a house cash and then have extra money and he can upgrade his lifestyle and so on and so forth. And that he had lived here since, I want to say it was 96 or 98. Now, obviously people can do that if their life circumstance and that works out, et cetera, that there's a certain amount of that that's natural. But when you have a lot of people that are doing that, you obviously lose the culture and you lose the community in your area. And that's somebody who's leaving for a good reason, right? People who leave because they can't afford to live here, that's not a good reason. Those are not people you necessarily want to lose because, I don't know, people want to be able to go get a burger. You want to be able to go get a coffee. You want people that will work those jobs. So where are they going to live? If it takes $30 an hour to qualify for an apartment here, well, when you go order a burger, the burger is going to have to cost $30 in order for the burger place to be able to pay somebody to live here. Although we'll address this in the next one because that's not what's going to happen. But the point is that outside investment that then when the rents go up, for example, even on my street here, one of my neighbors, and it's even not even outsiders, but then it becomes property management companies here are incentivized. People here are incentivized to start jacking people's rents up. I had a neighbor here who got a letter from their property management place a month before they were supposed to potentially renew their lease that told them that their rent was going to go from $1,400 to $2,500. That's an increase of about 80%. And I think after shopping that, they realized they weren't going to get quite that much for their place. So my neighbor had asked if they could have a 1-month extension. Property management company said, sure, for $1,800. And then they said, oh, and we'll give you 9 months after that. So that way, we'll give you 9 months at $1,800 after that. That's only an increase of 30% year over year. And they got 10 months total of extension. So that way they can get jacked up again next summer. I know there's going to be some of you who are going to say, well, that's the free market and that's how the market works. And that's this, that, and the other. That's fine. You can have that opinion. You can have the opinion that you like the free market and the market can do what the market does. And, whatever, if the prices just go up and people get forced out, oh, well, that's the market. But you can't have unlimited demand and your house price is going up 30% year over year, every year, and also not have to build affordable housing for people who work lower end jobs and be able to keep outsiders outside of your community, as in being able to resist growth. You can't have both. So you have to decide if you want unlimited housing prices because you own your house now, or because you own 20 houses, or if you want to be able to keep the area special and have people be able to afford here or to live here. Those are the two options. So what do we do about this foreign investment? These people that are just buying houses, cash offers, they don't even look at it. They just turn it into a rental. Oh, your rent's going up 50% year over year. Don't like it, whatever. Those people leave, and then it brings in new people to the area because things open up. And what that does is it also brings a demand because then people will start saying, oh, well, the price is going up for rentals. So what we need is good jobs, right? And then they'll say, oh, well, what's really cool is that we're going to attract some tech companies to come start, their tech companies in the area and bring their corporate offices to the area. We'll get some good jobs. Well, the issue with good jobs, so to speak, is that there isn't, let's say with a tech company, right? Okay, we're gonna attract a robotics startup. how many unemployed robotics engineers are living in Coeur d'Alene now? The answer's, I said unemployed, right? Unemployed robotics engineers living in Coeur d'Alene now. How many? The answer's probably 0. I don't think there's any. So when people say, oh, we got to get good jobs, they're also saying, oh, and we got to bring in the people from those jobs. We got to bring those people here. Well, those people are going to want their burritos rolled and their lattes made and this, that, and the other. Those people are going to have an appetite for bigger restaurants, better restaurants. They're going to have an appetite for Trader Joe's. They're not going to care about the local culture. They're not going to care about the local community. And so those are going to be people who want Coeur d'Alene to turn into where they came from. San Francisco, Seattle, wherever. They're not going to care. They're going to come here and they're going to go, man, what would be better about this place is if it just had more restaurants, which also means more traffic. What would be better is if it had more Costco's, which also means more crime. What would be better here is if there was just more cool Dave & Buster's, which means more apartments. All of those things have a trade-off. That's the trade-off. So the question is, how do you do anything about foreign investment? There are some ways that you can do things about this. As I understand, potentially even Post Falls has a primary residence tax, where if you don't live in the residence, then your property tax for City of Post Falls goes up. And even if that's not happening in Post Falls exactly like that or whatever, I just had read about that one time, or somebody had told me about that. But that's something that seems totally feasible. It seems like it's reasonable that there is such a thing as a prime residency tax, and we could have a property tax here in Coeur d'Alene that is whatever percent we want, and you can have a prime residency exemption. I mean, I'm not in favor of raising people's property taxes who are living here, but if somebody's just owning 5 places and living in California, I don't see why they shouldn't pay whatever number we can decide, as high of a number as the city council will go. I don't see why they shouldn't pay that. And if they don't like it, if their investment becomes not so profitable because of something like that, then they would sell their house. And then that would be a house that somebody here could buy and live in. And now you have people here that can work up the ladder and buy a house and be invested in the community here. Having a whole bunch of people in other places acquiring houses here and then acquiring the equity, all that means is that the money and equity that's realized here will eventually leave the area. If somebody from California buys a house here for $200,000 and they pay cash, and then the house is worth $400,000 and they sell it, they're taking that $200,000 back with them to California. We don't get that money. That's not something that's like, oh, well, the housing market is going up. That's great for us. But the money leaves the state. The money leaves. It goes. It's not like you have a family here or people here who own the house and they realize the equity and they spend their money here in the community and they live in the community. That equity leaves. So there's not even really an economic argument to where, this is good for us. It's not. It's economically, it's not good for us. Culturally, it's not good for us. And it drives a lot more of the growth for the traffic, demand for big chains and all these other things that are also not good for us. Those of us that like things the way they are and like the way that the city is special in that it's not like other cities, dense and sanitized and corporate. So I think there are some tax options that we have as far as property taxes. And the city, the way that it structures, obviously rental permits, I think that the city should explore some rent control options. I realize that's a very unpopular thing, but it's something that is probably coming down the pipe inevitably anyway. And that's actually another point that I'd like to make with, I'll make that point later in another video. I think rent control would be a great one because, like I said, the market has to come down. and the market has to become affordable. And if people are not able to make exorbitant rent on their property, and therefore they feel like, well, I have to sell my investment, that's fine with me. That's fine. It's not the government's job is not to make sure that people make 30% on their investment. The government's job is to do what's right for the area. And what's right for the area here, in my opinion, is to limit growth. It is to make sure that it's responsible. It's to stop outsiders who have tons of money from becoming predatory investors. And I do view this investing as predatory because it's pushing locals out. It's making the market unaffordable for locals. And ultimately what's going to happen, I mean, you could think about it this way. If businesses don't have, if there's not housing for workers here now, for people to work $15 an hour, $20 an hour, think a little bit further down the line. Just look at Spokane. If you start reading articles about Spokane, Spokane's having the same situation, but their political climate and their population is much bigger and the political climate is different. So every article that I read about Spokane pretty much now is saying, well, we need affordable housing. And in order to get affordable housing, we need to end single family zoning and we need to have rent controls. Just look at the League of Women Voters and the CDA Press questionnaire. They asked, how do I feel about raising taxes for high density apartments? They asked that. You can go read it when it comes out. They want to know. They're even priming everybody right now. How can we raise taxes for high density apartments? So the option here, like when I mentioned something like rent controls, the option isn't, oh, do nothing or have evil rent controls because we hate investors. Not true. You can invest your money. That's fine. The idea behind rent controls, exploring that option, is that we need the rental market to come down. We need the rental market to come way down. So that way people can afford to rent duplexes, small houses, etc., and they can afford to live here. Because if they cannot afford to live here, what's coming down the pipe is an end to single family zoning, rent controls anyway, and apartments. And we'll talk about this in the next video about multinational corporations, because that's what happens next. First, the market gets heated up. We start replacing the locals. The rents become exorbitant, so people can't afford to live here. And what happens next? People who work here cannot afford to live here. And then what happens next? That's what we'll go over in the next video. So you can check out my website, strongyoungmayor.com, Instagram at strongyoungmayor. And please join me if you do want to preserve what is special about Coeur d'Alene, and if you would like the city to remain as it is. If you want, if you like all of the small town, low traffic, if you like all of the, local businesses and the family atmosphere, if you like all of that and you want to preserve it, I can only push as far as everyone pushes me. So please jump in and help out.